Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Okay, so we are on verse 6 of chapter 2. In mine it's Valli 5, but I think some other book is Valli 2, probably, of chapter 2. Verse 6. What is the page number?
Page 238.
Page 238. Okay. So what was 5 was, not by prana, not by apan does any mortal live, but it is by some other on which these two depend that men live. So if they were pointing that, some people believe that, the body is alive because we are eating food, and another one says because we are breathing, and another one says that because pranas are active, that's why. All that to a certain extent may be true, but the final conclusion in this verse was that these prana apan also depend on some other force, factor, and that is the Brahman. So that's what you were talking about. And then little bit I had mentioned, but let's see here a little more. The verse may not say much, but Tejamaya Anandji has explained, and I think a lot of our doubts will get cleared, because a lot of people have doubts about that, what it is and all. We'll see what he's talking about. So here is a verse number 6. Hanta te idam pravishyami guhyam brahma sanatanam yatha cha maranam prapya atma bhavati gautama. Hant is like they use for, it has a lot of different meanings. Here is a well now. इसमें थोड़ी सी निराशा भी होती है कि मैं कैसे समझाऊं kind of thing. Oh my gosh, okay, something, because it's a difficult subject. So Yamaraj is saying, Hanta. Te is to thee. Idam is this. Pravakshyami, I will explain. Guhyam, the mysterious. So this word has come several times, and in Bhagavad Gita also. There is a whole chapter 9. Yoga of, royal secret. That is the English translation. So when people think of secret, some people immediately say, don't tell anybody secret. No, that's not the kind of what they're talking about. Guhyam means deep, and Guhyam means not easily understandable. ये बात बहुत गहरी है, ऐसे बोलते हैं ना हिंदी में, because थोड़ा सा इसके लिए दिमाग लगाना पड़ेगा, और थोड़ा सा subtlety में जाना पड़ेगा, putting your thinking hat. That's what I tell the 10th graders when I'm some deep subject we are trying to discuss. So we all have to put a thinking hat. That kind of guhyam it is. Brahman. So Brahman is also difficult to comprehend. Sanatanam, the ancient, the eternal. We know the word very well. Sanatan Dharma, that's how it came. It means, it's like laws of nature are always eternal. So the same way, this knowledge is eternal. Yatha is what? Cha is and. Maranam, death. Prapya, having obtained. Atma, the Atman. Bhavati, becomes, happens. Gautama, यहाँ पर नचिकेता को बोला है गौतम. उनका दूसरा नाम गौतम भी है. So what he's saying over here is, उसने originally प्रश्न पूछा था ना कि after death, कुछ रहता है या कुछ नहीं रहता. And believe me or not, there are people, many, who think कि कुछ नहीं रहता है. We are born ऐसे because of nature, something happened, some chemical soup and all that, and when we die, everything finish. Nothing remains. But our Sanatan Dharma, most of the time, not most of the time, it is a cardinal principle, the reincarnation. Without that, we can't move forward. But, if you, this is very interesting, because I did that experiment. People who say, no, there is nothing before, nothing after. Then ask them in another way. Ask them, hey, if you die, so you think you are completely gone? And then you will see their expression on their face. Actually, they have a doubt. And their arrogance, they might say, kuch nahi rehta, just for sake of argument. But उनका चेहरा देखो. कोई नहीं चाहता कि हम लोग, सब एकदम completely गायब हो जाए, I have done that experiment, that's what I was saying. But anyway. So let's see what this is saying according to Tejomay energy. So Tejomay energy said, okay, Nachiketa is learning from his guru over here, Dharmaraj or Yamraj. And so he is explaining him more and more detail now for everything, okay? And then this Hunt and, Gautam, I already explained that, hey, okay, I'm going to speak now. And it has a little bit of thing, abhi kaise samjhaun isko. All those things are there in that Hunt word. But, we don't need to go too much in detail about that. And Gautama, we already said. So he said, okay, I'm going to tell you this deep secret, which like a deeper knowledge of Brahman, which is Sanatanam. And I'm going to talk about a topic that we need to deal with it now. That's how Tejomay energy put it. What is that topic? That what remains after death. So he said, okay, we have seen two different things. What are those two different things? One is a physical body. Okay. That, okay, comes out of mother's womb, and then we have talked about it, that body ka dharma kya hai, we know. It is born, it grows, and then it starts decaying, and then when it dies. That happens to everybody. And, because we are still alive, but we have seen this now. Especially at our age, we have seen so many people come in this world and go. So there is no doubt about this. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that, okay, after the body is there and it's gone. And gone means gone back to its elements. But according to the law of nature, it merges back into those 5 elements. That's the process of decaying that happens. Okay? So that we don't have a question. We are fine because this is something pratyaksh for us. It is something that we have seen with our own eyes and understood. And then we have learned in detail what the Atma is, or what the Brahman is. It's absolute truth, absolute reality. From the beginning, we saw all the different, unborn, imperishable, and it is indicated by Om, symbol Om, infinite, all-pervading, all of those. So there is no birth and death in that. It is Shuddha. So there's no question about that too. We've been pumped into us enough that we know. So then, what are they talking about here? They're talking about that embodied one, the Dehi. So there is a third factor. One was the physical. It's called gross body, or sthula sharira they call it. And one is that pure Atman. उसके बीच में कुछ है चक्कर यहाँ पे. They are referring to that. And that, they call it Jiva, or the one indweller. What happens to that Jiva? Because we saw in the previous verses कि जब Jiva निकल जाता है, quits the body is gone. Decays very fast. Okay? So he's saying that जीवात्मा को क्या होता है, वो अभी यमराज जी बताएंगे. Because ये questions अभी का, after death, where do I go? Where do I take birth? This, that, it's going to come. But we are right now in this verse, we are just going to discuss this 3 different distinctions and have a clarity. Because otherwise, some people, if they get it mixed, then you are not going to have a clarity in Vedanta. That's what we are trying to understand. So, besides the physical body, there is something called the subtle body. Sukshma sharira, jisko bolte hain. What is it made up of? Mind, intellect, memory, and ego sense. In short, बाकी वो impressions of the past and सब कुछ उसमें होता है. It's like sometimes it's hard for us to understand कि वो previous life का हम लोग भूल जाते हैं. So अपने ऊपर वाली memory में हम लोग भूल गए हैं. मगर deep within us, we have everything. Okay, that's what even the modern psychologists now believe. That's why they have, I may not remember what I did it when I was 1 or 2 years old. Some people can go up to 3 years. 3 years के बाद वाली memory इनको याद रहती है, किसी को 5 साल, I don't know, all different thing. But actually वो memory हमारे subconscious में है, right? And that's why they do some regression, they call it early childhood. Some people have psychological problems, sometimes they do it. And then now you have heard of previous birth के बारे में भी regress करते हैं, to go to previous lives. They have so many, these kind of therapists and all that available. because there are all the impressions are there too, in a very sukshma, subtle form, and it can surface sometimes. So, and that's why this, when people remember their previous life, that memory has surfaced. That's why they remember it. Not, it doesn't happen to everyone, because the way, our teacher used to explain, God is very kind. हम लोग से एक फैमिली तो संभलती नहीं है. इमेजिन अगर हम लोग को 10 और फैमिली के बारे में बता दिया उनके, जो हम लोग तो पागल खाने में चले जाएंगे सभी. So that's what it is, that it's a kindness, but the people who are advanced in spirituality, who can handle it, they for them it comes up all day and they can handle it. We won't be able to. So basically what he's saying, that this sukshma sharir, or this subtle body made up of all these things, mind, intellect, memory, senses, and all that, impressions, this is also an entity, and this is subtler than the gross body, right? What does it mean? It has a special quality because it is subtler. What is that quality? It is able to manifest the Shuddha Atma or the Brahman, and it expresses as life. When somebody is alive, that capacity is there in the Sukshma Sharir, not in the gross body. And that is why when they are together, the physical body also looks alive. Otherwise, कितना जल्दी decompose होता है, otherwise it's all fit and good because there is a contact like that. So basically he's saying that even though mind and intellect is still inert, okay, because in Vedanta it is called subtle matter. It is still in arena of matter, so it doesn't have a life of its own. But it has a capacity to manifest it, and capacity to manifest this chetana. In Sanskrit mein word is chetana, and I don't know how to describe it in English. Feeling alive, conscious, okay? Feeling conscious, yeah, that may be the word. So now somebody might have a question, confusion, and Tejo Manaji beautifully he explained. So he said, okay, we have learned that Brahman is all pervading. It's everywhere. So that means when the person dies, means that dehi alag ho gaya or the sukshma sharir alag ho gaya, isn't Brahman still there in the dead body? So he said, yes, it is there, but only has existence there, not the conscious. Okay. So what does that mean? Existence, because it's a scientific fact that when our physical body dies, the 5 elements go back to the 5 elements. It's not like they have completely disappeared. They are still existing in that form, dust form or something. मतलब मिट्टी में मिल गया, dust gone to dust, but मिट्टी तो है ना. So उसको बोलते हैं existence. बोलते हैं ना सत चित आनंद. So the sat aspects, the existent aspect is still there, but it is not expressing life, So he said that how do we understand this? And he gave an absolutely brilliant example he gave. He gave an example of when you heat the water, okay, what expresses in the water? The heat aspect of the fire, not the light aspect. The fire is capable of giving both. When you say, hey, what is the dharma of fire? We always say heat and light. But the wood has a capacity to express both the qualities of the fire, heat and light. So the same way, the gross body or the physical body can only express the sat aspect, but the sukshma sharir does sat and the what you call chit aspect. Okay, 2 aspect it's capable of expressing. And the other thing I wanted to say is that he explained that when we say that it expresses, what does exactly it mean? It means for us to understand from our mind, they call it reflection of consciousness. I think that Meenaji always talks about it, that you have the consciousness, but we are reflected consciousness. The reflection means it's expressing life. Like we say, like Swamiji used to say this. We never think about it this way. There are plants, animal, and humans, right? On one hand, we look so far apart from each other. But he said there is one thing completely common in us, all three. It's called the life. We know when the plant is dead versus alive. We know when the animal is dead versus alive. We know when the human is dead versus alive. So that life expressing is that consciousness, reflected consciousness. So then what happens is that, a little more technical, I'll try my best to explain. This mind and intellect के साथ साथ ना ये एक sense of I, that ego जो हम लोग बोलते हैं, वो भी आता है. तो उसको बोलते हैं जीवात्मा. Mind, intellect is expressing, but also the sense of I, and that is the one that travels in different lives. And he's going to discuss it in the coming verse. कैसे उसकी गति होती है, कहाँ जाता है वो. So, and then he also reminded us, Tejomayananji, that the existence of Jiva is due to ignorance. There are so many impressions in the Jivatma and all that, connected with the ignorance of the self. And that's why this transmigration happens. So the whole query is that, hey, what happens to this Jivatma? So he's saying that, okay, there are some people who study just the physical science. And actually, if you look in the world, you will find plenty of those people. Because sometimes I watch all these shows and they are trying so hard to find out where the life originates in the physical world. They try to go this experiment, that experiment, itna deep jate. So they have their own way of thinking, that hey, what is this? Where this life came from. And then he's saying there are psychological people who study psychology, they have their own thought about it. And then there are third kind, our kind, who are, thinking of philosophy, vagara mein they are interested, religious people, although whatever you call. They look at Vedanta as a praman. Vedanta is going to explain to me that what this is happening. So those are our kind of people. So that's what Yamraj is going to do now, that he's picking up this topic of, this Jivatma, kya hai? So he just wanted to explain that what this is, so that when we go to the next verses, we have a clarity in our head that there is a physical body, there is a sukshma sharir, and then there is that final. Because the word Atma, Swamiji is going to explain in his commentary when we read, sometimes you use the word Atma for a subtle body also. तो इंडिया में बोलते हैं ना, उसकी आत्मा निकल गई उसके शरीर से, और आत्मा किसी और में प्रवेश कर गई. That actually they are referring to the subtle body, not that. But in Vedanta, the real definition of Atma is that Atma Paramatma. But still they use this word for different. So you have to know which context they are using it. And then sometimes they use it for the body also. But then there is a Dehatma, Jivatma, and Atma. You see the thing now? The three levels. So, coming back to this whole idea of that, existence is always present everywhere in everything. But the manifestation of the subtle body only happens manifestation of the consciousness only happens in the subtle body. And the other example I was going to think is, when you take a block of copper and just put it there, the electricity is not to conduct through that. But if you take a wire of a copper, electricity will conduct through that. In science also this happens. So, this is how the subtle body is, that it can express something. And the other example I was thinking was of the computer. That there are this hardware, software, everything is there. But the way they make the computer is, once the electricity goes through it, it becomes alive. The same way, you have the pranas, you have all the assemblage, just like a computer. It is capable of doing a lot of things, but it cannot do anything until the Brahman is expressing through it. So I thought that was another example that I thought of. So he's going to just talk about it, that where does it go, this subtle body and all that's coming in the next few verses. But this clarity was very important about these three different levels, because I see a lot of people ask that question. That what goes, what. So if anybody has any doubt about it, it's a very good idea to clarify and discuss this. Did everybody understand what he's saying about the three different levels? And that how only subtle body expresses that Chaitanya or the Brahman. That's why that connection with the subtle body and the gross body is so important. Because until they are together, it's not going to express life. Shall we read then? Some other points was going to come up. Any volunteers to read?
I can read already.
Yeah, Nareshji.
Well now, O Gautama, I will explain thee the mysterious and ancient Brahman, and also what happens to the soul after death. All that Lord Death has so far said seems to be put in an introduction to the subject proper, which is what happens to the soul after death. Lord Death here kindly informs Nichiketa he will be now initiated into the knowledge of what happens to the jiva when it has once experienced the process of death in its delusions. And surely we shall never have a better reporter than Lord Death himself to explain to us what happens to the soul after the body has become cold and inert in the icy embrace of death.
So here I was just thinking about it, that this particular Upanishad, how clever they are. They are asking the question of, hey, what happens after death? Who they are asking? The death himself. उसी को मालूम होएगा ना कि क्या. If you want to know something, you go to the source of it. You go to that person, the horse's mouth. So they're very clever. थोड़ा doubt भी होएगा, वो भी निकल जाएगा. And I didn't know that, but there is some Hollywood movie about this death coming to visit this rich man. I'm going to see it, because sometimes what they do in these Hollywood movies is they take the idea from our Vedas and they make it some juicy story and all that. And I don't know exact name, but my son was telling me about that movie and I was interested to watch it, because they probably similar concept they're having, their conversation with death, in other words. Because he said that they're having a conversation, the death and this rich man.
Atma, the ego center. In the Upanishad mantras, we often meet the word with the use of the word Atman to indicate sometimes in the body, sometimes in the mind, sometimes intellect, and yet at other times the mind and the mind conditioned pure consciousness, the jiva. Here in this particular mantra, the word Atman is used to indicate the ego center and not the self.
So everybody understood this, I hope. That when they use these different words, we now as a student of Vedanta, we should be able to pick up which Atma they are talking about over here.
For if we were to assume that the word literally means its own special connotation, it would mean that the mantra here is contradicting the very philosophy of the Upanishads. Nothing ever happens to pure consciousness, the truth. When pure consciousness presides over the function of this body with the reference to the body, it is said to be the individual soul, just as the all-pervading space with reference to four walls of the room is said to be the room space.
So here Swamiji is taking even a little deeper meaning of it. He's saying actually मैं ये सब बोलते हैं ना ब्रह्मन ही है सब. हम लोग को रूप और क्या बोलते हैं form, name and form, नाम और रूप दिखाई देता है. So in reality, even they are not wrong when they refer this, because it is like it is one only, everything. But just for our understanding that when that ego has risen, that's why this whole journey happens. In some ways, from the very highest क्या बोलना चाहिए, point of view of the Vedantin, all this is Maya anyway, right? That's what they say. That's why they say that. So all this is, even though it looks very real to us, they are saying it's like a dream like only. It's same thing like when we are dreaming. When a person is in a dream, उसको कोई convince नहीं कर सकता कि ये dream है. उसको इतना real लगता है वो. He's getting hurt, he's getting pain, he's eating some food and enjoying that food. Only when he wakes up, then he realizes, it was a dream. Same way he's talking about it in that context he's talking about over here.
In fact, the eternal space can never be conditioned or limited by the walls, which themselves stand in space. Similarly, consciousness or knowledge is homogeneous and one without a second. When the body perishes, the divine spark or the life center that presided over the body while it lived undergoes no change but eternally remains the same. The death and the consequent departure from the dead body at the time of death and the feeling of having entered a new form at the time of birth are both delusory ideas of ego-centric.
He's talking from the highest perspective now. That even, like going from one, that's why they say in reality there is no birth and death, but we just experience it because we have an ego center. We feel separated, that's why we experience it.
The supreme self reflected in the mind intellect is, we have already seen, the jiva or the ego. The ego idea leaves its idea of I-ness and my-ness with the dead body. Each ego center comes to develop a sense of ownership and possession with another body form. Thus, when Lord Death says that he will explain what happens to the Atman after death, he certainly means to explain to us what happens to Jiva with all its vanities or I-ness and the attachment to my-ness when it leaves one body to perish and enters the womb to take up another body.
Yeah. So he's just explaining that actually it is the I-ness and attachment is one which causes. And that's why they say, the person who has dropped all the attachment, have no desire, that he doesn't need to take birth again. So there are so many different ways you can kind of interpret this. There's so much information is there, or different angles you can take. But to me, the most significant thing that for our purpose was to have that distinction of the gross body, subtle body, and the Atman, so that we know. Most of the people want to know, are there any laws, or how do the subtle body travel? And that's why we had that question come up in the class, that do humans always become humans? According to Vedanta, no, they can go down also. If your karmas are so bad, you can regress in your progress and you can become an animal again. And if it is very good, then you can go to higher lokas. But even that is not considered the greatest, because the greatest is merging with the Brahman in Vedanta. And the other aspect is, once you take this human form, you get an opportunity to do that. Each human form is an opportunity. So it's a very heavy subject, but just once we understand a little pieces of the puzzle, then as we keep studying, it kind of all connects together. That's how I look at it. In the beginning, it might be a little overwhelming. Or it may not be. Some of you may have already studied these things and all that, and it just give a little more clarity how they explain the saints and sages. But there are many different aspects to it. Any question, comment, or anybody wants to add anything toward this verse? I think this combination of Bhagavad Gita right now, what's going on over there, and this, like I was saying, everybody gets into more meditative state rather than conversation state.
I do have a question, Umaji. In the paragraph one, not the last, but one before that, when we say this ego idea leaves the ideas of I-ness and my-ness with the dead body. Each ego center comes to develop its sense of ownership and possession with another body form. Now, I thought I-ness and my-ness goes with the body, with the subtle aspect of the body, because that's what is carrying. Because we haven't still haven't dropped that in our body of I-ness, ego, and therefore that makes us go into another body, right?
So,
when
okay.
you say that, what does it really mean?
So what it really means is there are two levels of this I-ness, minus. One is I-ness, minus, because I have some desires there in me, and that's why I'm going to take birth. Other I-ness, minus is with this particular family, this particular body. And, if you ever watch any of those NDE shows where they near death experience, jisko bolte hain, when they go in the other realm, they have no attachment to this body. And they don't want to come back because, like, hey, why do I want this limited thing? That attachment he's talking about. But then what happens is some desires are left, so you take another body, then you get attached to that body. And then uske saath jo
fam.
Huh?
Okay.
Yeah.
The vasanas are still there.
Vasanas are still there.
Carried over to the other body.
Right.
Pardon?
That's what it is. But here when he says that I-ness and my-ness is body se chhod diya tumne. Ab dusri pakad li bas. It's like clothes, okay? I have attachment. जब नया नया कुछ खरीदो ना कोई expensive clothes, हमको कैसे attachment हो जाता है, right? फिर वो जब फटा पुराना हो जाता है, I don't have I-ness, minus with it. I very easily donate, get rid of it and get another one. That's the I-ness, minus he's talking about. Yeah.
That's what they're talking about here. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other thing? Okay, then I can close this. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om.